Hi guys, I'm a forester here with a video that I'm particularly interested in making for you. Now, I practice forestry in South Carolina, as you probably know, and I can assure you that we have more standing timber volume than ever recorded. We have fertile soils, adequate rainfall, and we have a long growing season. But most of all, we have markets for our trees, which give landowners a critical reason to invest in their timberland. And the biggest timber market in the South is for fiber products like paper. Now, if you're like me, you probably don't get your daily news by holding a newspaper in your ink-stained fingers. I finally canceled my newspaper subscription a year or two ago when I couldn't get reliable delivery. And a lot of people are canceling their delivery. So many, in fact, that we've had the shutdown of 2 paper machines in this area recently. So I've been pleased to note that writing paper has been making a comeback of sorts. It goes hand in hand with the renewed popularity in fountain pens. You know, a pen by itself is either a paperweight or maybe a fidget spinner. Add ink and you have a paperweight and ink-stained fingers. Add paper though, and you have communication. So what signs do I have that writing paper is making a comeback? Well, it's in all the notepads that are being gifted. Here's just a sample of 10 notepads that I've received recently. Something is obviously going on. It seems that paper has become the gift of choice. I've only bought 2 of these notepads, the Tomoe River notepad here and the Rhodia notepad. Both have high quality, although very different papers. You've seen the Rhodia most often on my fountain pen videos. The other notepads here on the table were gifted to me. Now, all notepads aren't created equal, and you have to match pen and ink to paper. I'll give you a quick rundown of these notepads with my general recommendations at the end of the video. And I'll give you a writing sample on each notepad with these 4 pens. And I chose these pens carefully. First of all is my Lamy 2000. It has a German medium nib. And this pen right here will put the most ink on paper and will test the papers the most of all. Next will be my Pilot Custom 823. This is a medium nib, but it's a Japanese medium, and it'll be a nice comparison to the Lamy. The third pen I'm going to use is my Moonman M600. This has a Japanese fine nib, and I really enjoy writing with it. I think I have the best handwriting of any of the pens with this. You can judge for yourself. And the last pen that I'll use works with just about all the papers that you're going to see, and it's this Hero 359 with a Japanese extra fine nib. Okay, those are the pens I'm going to use. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, I'll cover all 10 notepads pretty quickly by just giving a general overview of them instead of any detailed review. I'll save that for later videos. This is the first notepad that I ever purchased though, and I've about used it up. I'll be replacing this sometime shortly. This is a Rhodia notepad. It has bright white paper and also dot grid instead of lined paper, which I think I like the dot grid better. Now, you might see this ink up here. That's not bleed through. That's just, I didn't allow this to dry and shut it, and that just rubbed off on the page above it. But here's all 4 of those pens. This is the Lamy 2000. This is the German medium. This is the Japanese medium. This is the Japanese fine and the Japanese extra fine. And there's no problems with bleed through or feathering for any of those pens, those inks. And here's the back side just to show you that there is no bleed through problem. So this is probably the safest choice, and it's the one that you'll probably see the most on YouTube pen reviews. I'd highly recommend the Rhodia. The other pad that I've purchased myself is this Tomoe River paper pad. This is the A5 size. And I'm going to open it up. It has cream colored paper, and this is very unusual paper. It reminds me of onion skin paper almost. It's almost see-through. You can almost read the writing that's on the second sheet below this. But if you look at it, this ink, I think ink looks better on this paper than any other paper I'm going to show you. But you do have to be careful because it just sits on top. It doesn't soak into the paper, and you have to make sure that it has time to dry. But you're not going to see any feathering or bleed through with this paper at all. Now, I think you could use both sides of this paper. I know you could with a fine or extra fine nib. But this is high quality paper. I really enjoy using this more than any other. But I will say I haven't used it very much because I like it. For some reason, if I really like something, I tend to save it, which I'll get to that later in the video, a recommendation. This is a notepad that's very unique. This was made by a friend of my wife's, and she gave it to my wife as a gift. But she may be offering these up for sale, I'm not sure. It even included a pen with it. But here's the writing with all 4 of these pens, and I'll give you a close-up because this is just a normal notepad. It's not a special paper, and you're going to see more of the bleed through and feathering here than probably any other. So I've circled things to look at, like right here you'll see the feathering right there. You'll see feathering. You'll see areas like this right here with the Pilot Custom 823 where the letters are closed up. You'll see a lot of feathering down here. But by the time you get down here to the fine and extra fine nibs, you don't see nearly the problem. But I want to turn the page and let you see the other side, the bleed through. And you do have a considerable amount of bleed through, especially with those medium nibs. And you do have a little bit of bleed through with even the fine nib. But if you have an extra fine nib, you're probably not going to have a problem and be able to use this quality paper. Okay, next, I want to straighten up my pens because I knocked them all over the place. And I want to cover 3 notebooks in one. So these are 3 notebooks. They're all very similar, and you see a lot of these at meetings. So these were each given to me by somebody different. This was given to me by a fundraiser at NC State, North Carolina State University. All of these are very similar. They all have a band that they're hardback. They have a band that holds them closed. They usually have a place to put slips of paper in the back. That one I haven't really used. This was given to me at a meeting recently by somebody who was exhibiting at the meeting, very similar to the other ones. And then this one I'll go into a little more detail. It was given to me at a meeting, and you will notice it was made in China by a company called Spector and Company, and you'll see that name on probably more of these than any other name. So they make a good number of these notepads. I'm going to see if I can find the sheet. So I only wrote on one of these, this one right here, and this paper is fairly stout paper. I don't know the weight of it. I couldn't find that online. But I will say that I didn't have a problem with any of these pens. So if I was going to have a problem, it would be with the Lamy 2000. You might notice a little bit of lack of detail on the letters, but nothing that's going to really bother me. The bigger thing probably to notice is that with the mediums like this one, I couldn't finish that quote, whereas I had room to spare with this extra fine down here. Now, these are really handy, and I've got a good number of them. I did want to note that this one was extra special to me because I went to North Carolina State. But one thing to note is that it's falling apart. And the reason for that is that I haven't used it. Now, I received this probably, 3 or 4 years ago, and maybe 5 years ago, and it's just sat on my shelf for that whole time because I didn't want to use it up. I valued it. So here again, with a lot of things, if it's like the Tomoe River paper, if I value something, I tend to want to save it, and that's probably not a good thing to do. Now, I've saved the best for last because these last 4 notebooks are my favorite ones of all. This is the most recent one that I've received, and I received this a couple of weeks ago at an inbound trade mission that we hosted in Charleston, South Carolina. These were handed out to companies from India and Vietnam. The one thing that makes this very unique is the outer coating, the cover, and it's rubbery or some type of synthetic material that feels rubbery that's been fused to a paper lining, but it makes for a very unique, sturdy cover. And there's the name Spector and Company again from China. Now the paper is cream colored, it's lined. There's all 4 of those pens with the writing sample. If we're going to see a problem, it's going to be with that Lamy 2000. But to be honest, if there is any feathering, it's not noticeable. You'd have to notice it using a hand lens, and so that's no problem as far as I'm concerned. There's no bleed through, and I actually use this every day, this notebook. This is the one that I've been using for my to-do list, and I use both sides of the paper, so there's absolutely no problem with this. I really enjoyed the size of that notepad. The next one I'm going to show is very unique, and I'm going to cover up the bottom because I met with a company in Germany about 5 years ago, I guess, and they had this made for me and printed my name and title on the outer cover. Now this is a Moleskine notepad or notebook, and I've heard of Moleskine. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I've never owned one. Well, this is my very first one, and as a result, I didn't write in this at all for the 5 years. Here again, if something is special to me, I tend to want to save it and not use it. But here's a writing sample with all 4 of those pens. Like I say, there's the Lamy 2000, and the ink really looks good for all of these on this paper right here. I don't know the weight of the paper, but I would say it's intermediate between the Tomoe River and the Rhodia notepad. It's somewhere in between. There's no feathering and also no bleed through. I think I could use both sides of the paper, especially if I was using a fine nib. Okay, the next one is a notebook, and it's a fairly large notebook that was given to me by this company, Colombo Energy, which is a Portuguese firm. And I do like this. It's one of my favorite notebooks, and I actually use it. I like the size. I can get more writing done. But one problem I do have with it is the size of this ring binder. And let me open up to the right page, which is right here. But that ring binder, it does lay flat, so I can write easily, but that binder gets in the way. Now this paper is not the highest quality paper, but I want to show you that you don't see that much of a feathering issue with any of these pens. In fact, it looks pretty well, pretty good. And I drew this line right here just so you could see that as the nib got finer from the German medium to the Japanese medium to the Japanese fine to the Japanese extra fine, that quote got shorter and shorter. And as far as bleed through, there's a little bit of bleed through with the 2 medium nibs, but by the time you get down to fine and extra fine, there's no problem. So I really enjoy this one, and I've been using it for taking notes at meetings, that type thing. I can get a lot of writing in. Now I saved the best for last, and it's this notebook right here. This was handed out in 2018 at a conference that I attended, the Southern Forest Products Export Conference. And a lot of thought was put into this. Now this is a Filofax notebook, which I had heard of Filofax, but I hadn't owned one. So this was my first experience with it. You'll notice that it lies flat. It does have the ring binders, but these ring binders are smaller and they tend to not get in the way. The thing I like about Filofax is that the pages come out, and so you can reorganize pages, you can just take pages out, you can put pages in, and so it makes it very convenient. It has a strap so that you can save your place or you can keep the binder closed, And let me show you the printing. And I have been using this a good bit. Let me show you the printing. There's with the Lamy 2000. You're not going to see a problem at all with any of these nibs. So you have the luxury of even using the Lamy 2000 that puts out the most ink. And as far as bleed through, oh, just a tad bleed through with the two medium nibs. The finer nibs have no bleed through at all. But I've enjoyed this. One thing that Filofax has is a lot of optional sheets, dividers, that type thing that you can insert in the notebook to make it more useful. But there you have it. That's my favorite one of all, but I've quickly gone over 10 notebooks, and there are other ones that I've received. I do want to end up this video with 3 recommendations. First of all, treat yourself to some quality paper. The 4 brands that I recommend are the Rhodia, Tomoe River, the Moleskine, and this Filofax. But don't just buy quality paper, actually use it. I've been guilty of saving some of my best paper, as you've seen. For when, I don't know. Just enjoy it. Second recommendation is that you can always use fine and extra fine nibs on just about any paper. I often carry 2 pens, something like my Pilot Custom 823 for better quality paper, and then my Pilot Metropolitan for editing on copy paper. And finally, in this digital age, set yourself apart through handwriting with fine pens and papers. Which has more meaning to you, receiving a text message without any capitalization or punctuation, or opening a handwritten note? Experience fountain pens, inks, and quality paper, and you'll look for opportunities to write. Y'all take care.